Yeah, bro. Stop looking, bro. All right. So we're going to go ahead and begin. It's Unit 2, Day 1. It is the 25th, 9/25/25. We are absolutely getting through September. You guys are in Unit 2, which means we are a quarter of the way done with our class. We are about a quarter of the way done with our time together until you become more mature sophomores. So we're in Unit 2. Guys, do we need to move? We're good? All right, we're talking today. We need this Bible passage. As I said, the test that you guys just took, and for the most part did really well on, except a few of you guys getting the wrong Bible passage and getting an automatic 0. I don't know who that would have happened to, right, Junior?
Nah.
Yeah. So
do that. Come on.
we need the right Bible passages. So it's Exodus chapters 1 and 2. Exodus chapters 1 and 2 that we're going to look at. These are very important passages. They set things up. All right, a reminder, when we are talking about the final exam, it will be exactly like the test you took, but it will be comprehensive, meaning the exit ticket questions I give you every day, I'll have a pool of them at that point, and I will just give you 40 questions from the pool of exit ticket questions. And I will give you any random day throughout the entire semester to have to do that same thing you just did on the test, to write about, wrap up, and summarize. All right, so today's is Exodus 1 and 2. It's the origin story of Moses. All right, so Moses, meaning to draw out, is his name, or drawn from, to draw out. It begins with Moses, and the book of Exodus that we're talking about also ends with Moses. So the book begins and ends with Moses, who is our central character. So we're going to understand and seek to understand a very important idea that Moses is a character more than just a person. All right, so let's understand. We're going to try to keep this in our heads. Again, it's an important thing, so we should be writing this down, that Moses is a character, not just a person. Right? He is a central figure in ancient Judaism. So Moses is a very central figure. He is so central that the book of Exodus, so again, it starts with Moses and it ends with this phrase. It says, when Moses died, there were no more prophets. There was never again a prophet. There was never again a prophet like Moses. All right, what does this tell us about who Moses is as a person? Pretty important to the Israelite identity, right? Yes.
I know of a better prophet.
Who's the better prophet? Okay, so that's an important thing. Moses is so important that by the time of Jesus, the Bible authors actually, and we're going to discuss this when you guys get to New Testament class, Moses is such a central character and such an archetype of the prophets, right? Moses, the archetype of prophets. The archetype of prophets. He is so central to Israelite identity that when the authors are writing the New Testament stories, one of them, the Gospel of Matthew specifically, actually frames his entire story to make a point that Jesus is the new Moses. Right? That's how important Moses is. Jesus becomes the new Moses, but Moses is a central figure. All right? He's a very, very big deal. So we need to pay attention to his story, see him as an important character. Yes, Elliot.
What about Elijah?
We'll get to that at a different time. All right, we'll do that one at a different time. For now, we're just focused on Moses and Exodus. And we need to also understand, as we're talking about this story today in particular, this is going to set us up. We're going to say the Exodus story, a story of hope and longing. Hope and longing. All right. We probably can't all read that because, as you guys made note on your test, my handwriting's really bad. But Exodus is a story of hope and longing. It's a story of hope because when was the Bible being redacted and written? Do we remember? Anybody? What was going on during that time? Shout it out. You just shout it. Exile. Yeah, Babylonian exile. So they're going to have they're going to want to hope for things, right? And one of the things they're going to hope for is release from exile. So it makes it a pretty important story of them getting released from slavery, right? It's happened to us before, so we're going to hope that it's going to happen again. So Exodus is going to be a story of look how God will provide for us. He's done it in the past. Surely he's going to do it again. But they're also longing for something, or desiring greatly, right? Longing is another way of saying desiring greatly. They're greatly desiring that God will send a new Moses, right? This is why they end it with the words, "Never." When Moses died, there was never again a prophet like Moses, right? Because they want somebody like him. They've had prophets at this point. They want somebody like him. So this is a very important story. All right, I want to make something clear that maybe somebody can argue with me. I don't know. Some people disagree, but they're wrong about this. All right, I'm just going to say they are wrong. Has anybody ever heard that Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible? This is tradition holds this. What does this phrase, if this phrase ends this book, what does this phrase tell us? He probably didn't write it, right? Because it says there's never again. So this author of this story knows about things that happen in the future from that story, right? So unless Moses is a fortune teller and knows the future, that there's never a prophet like Moses, he's not the only one doing this. He might have written some stuff, but he didn't write all of these stories. And it's important for us to note that Moses did have a hand, sure, but he is not the only author. There is editing and redaction happening there. We're going to notice it next class. I'm going to point out some very obvious editing of traditions. Go on. It's in I can't remember the exact verse that is in, but it's in right towards the end. All right. So this being said, I'm going to go over Exodus 1 and 2 very quickly. We're going to look at this story quickly, and then I have a big, huge theological outline I want to give you guys so that we have some really good language about describing God in just a little bit. All right. Exodus 1 and 2 is a story among many stories. One of many stories of this type. Stories like this. Yeah. All right. Well, Elliot, let's hold that, right? And we're going to get to that in a little bit, okay? So, one of many stories like this story, this is not, just like we've discussed with the flood stories, with other Bible stories, this one is not perfectly unique, all right? There's arguments that this is some sort of myth, but can I go ahead and erase this, guys? We're good? Yeah? All right. So I'm going to erase this so I can get writing some more things. All right. There's an ancient story, and this is going to sound very familiar to you guys, about a guy named Sargon of Akkad. Of Akkad. Akkad. All right, Sargon of Akkad. Now, this king, we know, son of a king. Son of a king has propagandists rewrite his story. All right. Let's say you are a famous king. You are a king, you are the rightful king, you are rich, but you want the underclass, you want the poor people to like you and to not rebel against you. What is a way that you would do that? If you're going to retell your story, how are you going to retell your story? You give them money or what else? Yeah, you're going to say, so he has his propagandist right, Eliot's right. You're going to rewrite your story to say, I actually came from that. I'm one of you guys, right? So Sargon, and we have documents to see this, Sargon of Akkad had his people rewrite his story, and I want to make note, this is way before the Exodus story was written down. Right? This is a story way older than Exodus. Sargon has his story reworked and says, I was one of you guys. I was poor. I was impoverished. My parents couldn't afford to feed me. So what did his parents do? They put him in a basket, a reed basket, covered in tar, and they send him down the river. And his parents run down the river to see if he's going to be taken care of. And who takes care of him except for a goddess? Right? So Sargon of Akkad floats down a river and gets cared for by a goddess, who then makes him eventually the king of Egypt. Or I can't remember where he's the king of. I think it was maybe whatever. Makes him the king. He becomes the king, and he rules the underclass and gets them to join him. Right? This sounds like the Moses story, doesn't it? They're very, very similar. What I mean by this, to say this, is that the Moses story is one of many, but it's a way of understanding and rationalizing. We will be taken care of. God is looking out for us, right? It is pointing out that God is looking out for us. Because they are, again, as we've said, Israel is identifying themselves with the main character. So Israel identifies themselves with the main character of these stories. And they say, we will be taken care of. Yeah. They're trying to say that they will be taken care of. All right, this is our real quick overview. Hopefully that could help you understand some of the background. I would love to spend more time on this. I might give you guys a quick reading to do at a different date about this. If you've been reading the Exodus book, who in here is reading that Exodus book? So this might sound kind of familiar to you, right? You've seen this name already, I hope. You've seen some of this information. It's familiar. We'll go over this at a different time, again, because this is the kind of stuff I love. All right, here's what we're going to do now. We're going to give a quick theology outline. I want you guys to make sure very carefully that you have everything down that I write down. All right, I'm going to erase this, and we're going to get going. This is going to be a lot, and we're just going to have to hang in there. But this prevents me from having to do it throughout the course of multiple days like I have in the past. All right, the first thing we have to understand, Exodus is theological narrative. Theological narrative. All right, I'm going to define these words. Narrative just means stories, right? Narrative is stories. Stories, usually we could go more into what narrative is on chronology, all that stuff. But then theological is what we believe about God. What we believe about God. All right, these are stories about what we believe about God. The goal in these, the author is working towards a theological goal. All right, the author has a specific goal that they want us to know certain characteristics of God. So again, the author wants us to know specific characteristics of God. We're going to walk through some of these right now. These are not every single thing that you could use to describe God, but they're very helpful tools because we're young in here, right? We're like 14, 15 years old. You guys probably don't all know you're 14, 12? Wow, you're 12? 11? Yeah, I can play this game all day, Brooklyn. All right, so let's go ahead and get started, guys. We don't all have these terms. That's okay. We're going to learn these. We're going to use them this semester. If you need other terms to talk about God, we can get you there too. All right, we're going to see three big categories, so be prepared for three numbers with several letters under each one. So it's like a big outline, and then it's got several steps underneath each one to help describe and understand those settings. So the first one, we're going to see the power of God. Power of God to control history. To control history. You can imagine this one, and if you want to leave little notes, leave sidebars for yourself in your notes to help you have more definitions. This one we can imagine would be helpful for the ancient people in exile, right? Because they want to know God is in charge. They want to know when there's chaos and struggle and pain and torment in their lives, it's not just random, but God is in charge in some way, right? They're going to trust God will control history. God will act in some way. We're going to have two ways of God acting here. We're going to give A and B, two ways of God acting. The first is acts of salvation. Acts of salvation. All right, God is going to give acts of salvation. We all know what this one is, right? It's God interfering on behalf of somebody. God interferes on behalf of a person or groups to save them and help them. So God steps in an act of salvation to save and help. This would obviously be the one that people that are reading the Exodus story are going to think of a lot. But of course, what is something we're all going to pray and desire God also does when he gives us an act of salvation? What do we want him to do to our enemies? Acts of judgment, right? Acts of judgment. Now, these are God acting. I'm just going to put a quick note here. God acting against someone. Again, I think this one's pretty obvious. God acting against someone or an idea, something like this. These ones usually, these two, we often are going to see kind of side by side. And they're usually called out and it says, this is what they are, this is what God's doing. What are you doing? Making weird faces. We usually see that this is what God is going to, it's going to say God is acting, doing this thing. But sometimes it might start as one and become something else, right? In today's story, I'll go ahead and give you the answer for today's story. Acts of salvation, acts of judgment, and then acts of judgment, the little note is just God acting against somebody, right? Judgment means he's going against somebody. So, in today's story, God seems to just let the suffering of Israel happen until finally, when they're suffering and struggling, he then says it's time. It ends with it saying God knew it was time to act, right? And so he has to go step in on behalf of somebody. So this becomes an act of salvation. All right, our next one. This is the one that we're going to see a lot, and I make sure you guys leave yourself some room to have a description on this. Humanity of God. All right, humanity of God. Yeah. Oh, good point. Thank you, Eliud. Good catch.
Thank you, Elliot.
All right, 2. Yeah, luckily, I'm glad you caught that. Humanity of God. All right. So here's my little thing here. Language that makes God feel more familiar, feel more, well, we'll say feel more knowable. Feel more knowable. Or metaphoric descriptions that sound human. Now, I want to be very clear. I am not saying when I say this, I'm not saying that God is human or has human feelings or emotions or anything like that. We talked about this with the Noah story. Can you just write your question down and ask it later? We talked about this with the Noah story, right, where we're about to describe when he gets back. You can go. We've described of God remembering, right? So we're actually going to write that as our first one, right? This is our A right here. Is the God who remembers. The God who remembers. And I'm going to give a little description under this one, is that remembers means to act on behalf of, half of, or give specific attention to. Give specific attention to. All right, let's describe this one. I want to explain this one more. The God who remembers. This is using our metaphorical language, right? Of God remembers. It looks and feels like that. So the author looks and feels and sees that, wow, God remembered. It's not because he forgot. It's because he's acting on behalf of. But remembered is our best language, right? So these are our ways of describing God that feel and sound very human. They're using metaphorical language to make God sound closer to us and more understandable for us. We're going to see these a lot in Exodus. I really love all of these. I really love this humanity of God language because it is the human authors creeping in, right? It's the human authorship creeping in with the divine inspiration to create something really awesome. So I love these sections. All right, our next one in this section. All right, so here's our B. I know, guys, this is really big. I realized recently that this would be a really good test, would be to give you an open note test, but where you have to recreate this outline would be, it'd be awesome. Well, it'd be open note, so if you're a good note taker, easy. All right, this next one, the God whose anger may be averted. May be averted. I'm going to describe this, but I just like this word. The God whose anger may be averted. All right. The word averted means turned away or refocused, right? Redirected. You could say directed somewhere else. So, one of my kids the other day was annoying me and being kind of rude. So, attempted to avert my anger. I was not going to let that happen. And instead, I just kept my anger at them because I am not always a forgiving person, right? But this language is to show that God is capable of that. When we say God whose anger may be averted, we saw this in the Noah story. We remember that, right? That God says, I'm going to destroy all of humanity. I am heartbroken and sad. I am sad of this. So I'm going to destroy. But what does he end up doing instead? Yeah. Well, yeah, he ends up remembering Noah. But before that, he notices Noah and changes his mind. At least that's what the author describes, that he changes his mind and decides not to. So this is anger, the God whose anger may be averted. Now Moses is going to change God's mind as well. At least it looks like it. I'm recording myself, so somebody's going to take that out of context. Right? It looks like it. That the human authors make this look very much like, Kamsa, you can go, like God's mind gets changed. Right? If we pray hard enough, if we act righteous enough, God will relent in his anger. He'll stop judging us. All right. I have two more in this section, so I'm going to give C. I know, this is long. All right, the God who speaks. The God who speaks. All right, the God who speaks. This phrase pops up. God spoke to Moses. God spoke through the prophets. Right, it is God speaking physically through people. The God who speaks here is God speaking to or through people. And our next one. All right, this is super low. All right, this last one in this section, God who dwells or lives, God who dwells or lives among his people. All right, God who lives among his people. And here's what this means. He lives there, right? He has a physical presence.
Among us?
Among us, yeah. Among his people. Right, so God has a physical presence. Exodus is famous for this one. book of Exodus is super famous. This is what the temple was, right? So when the authors lost the temple of God, they felt that they lost this aspect of God, right? This is why this is important, that the temple is a symbol of a God who dwells among his people. It is a symbol of a unique God. All right, we're going to get to that more in just 1 second. I have our last section. So there's going to be 4 letters in this one. I'm going to give one little sidebar to have in our first letter. But we have our last number here. I know, guys, this is really big, but you're going to need this going forward. So please make sure you're getting this. We're almost there. All right. The otherness of God. The otherness of God. All right. I'm just going to go ahead and give this one a box too. The ways God is unique. So the ways God is unique in ancient culture, and separate from humans. All right. The ways God is unique in ancient culture and separate from humans. We'll get there, Benny. We can do it, all right? All right, the ways God is unique in ancient culture, separate from humans. Here's our first one. I love these ones. We're going to see this next class. Go to the next page. Yahweh statements. Yahweh. We're going to write it in, we're not going to put, all right, W-A-H-W, we don't need to put the vowels in there. Hebrew doesn't have vowels. You're not supposed to write the name of God. This is the name of God, all right? This is the one I'm going to put our little box for. Shows a personal and moral character. The other gods may have had names and titles. They don't have these personal names that show that God desires to be close, right? And this name is supposed to be so holy that in ancient Judaism, they removed the vowels from it, which is why I'm not writing it with vowels. You don't write it with vowels because to do so is to blaspheme God, right? That's just the ancient Jewish belief. That to do so is to put his name in a way that will disappear, right? So you are putting his name in a way that would disappear, and then, therefore, that is to blaspheme because it's talking bad on his eternity. So I'm going to respect that as well and follow that and not put the vowels. So Yahweh statements. These are times when God says, I am who I am, right? We see this with the burning bush. The story you guys probably know is the burning bush. When he says, I am the Alpha and the Omega. All of these things, they show a personal moral character. This is unique in ancient cultures because their gods were the gods of stuff, but mostly they were chaotic bad, right? Mostly they just dominated and crushed. They were not personal. They did not have these personal qualities that Yahweh does. All right. The next one is, this is a cool one too. God who is transcendent. This is a nice 50-cent word for the day. Yeah. You know, if a normal word is 5 cents, this one is 50 cents, right? Because it's nice and valuable. Transcendent. T-R-A-N-S. Transcendent. C-E-N-D-E-N-T. Transcendent. Meaning complete. So I'm going to say holy, W-H-O-L-L-Y, or completely, entirely above and other. This is why we have to use metaphorical language of our humanity of God, because God is transcendent and above us. And when we get to these stories, this is Moses looking upon looking upon God, having his back, like facing God's back, and his face glowing for the rest of his life, because God is so other that he just is totally transcendent, right? God is transcendent. He's wholly above and other. This is not how ancient people often thought of their gods. Their gods were more powerful, but they were not transcendent. Not like this. All right. He almost dies, right? All right. Our C and then our D, and then we're done. All right. C is the God who is holy. The God who is holy. Another way of saying this, I know I said there'd be one box, but I'm going to put a few, is worthy of worship. Worthy of worship. Ancient religions believe you worship gods, but why do you worship the God of the Nile River? Why do you worship the God of fertility? Anybody? Why would you worship the God of fertility? You want a baby, right? Why would you worship the God of the harvest? Because you want a good harvest. You worship Yahweh because he's worthy of it. That's it, right? The idea here, this is totally different. It is not transactional. It is not that I'm serving God and he's giving me this thing. He is worthy of worship. Worthy of worship. All right, here's our last one. We've seen this one. No, I said C and D are our last ones. Very last one. Then we're going to read this passage and do group work. And you'll have 30 minutes. All right. So, we've seen this one, but I'm going to explain how it fits here. God who lives among his people. God who lives among his people.
Didn't you just say that?
Yes, but we put it here. He's invested in individual human lives. Human lives or well-being. All right. The idea here is that he lives among his people. He's invested in their well-being, right? This last one, God who lives among his people, the same one as the last one on the other. It's that he's invested in the individual human lives. He's invested in individual human lives and the well-being of people. We saw this one in the Garden of Eden story, right? He lives among his people. He's invested in their lives. He makes them a garden. Before humanity is made, he makes them a garden to give them paradise. So we see this one all over. All right, this is our big outline. This semester going forward, I'm going to ask you guys to give me the theology of the text. And I'll ask for you to give me these types of things. Right? You'll say, we see the power of God, he's active in salvation. Or you'll say, we see the otherness of God, he's totally transcendent here. Whichever one you see, you'll identify where and why. We're going to start doing that today with like one or two sentences. We're going to look at these. Now, we might use other language, but these are going to be our pretty basic outline, because this is our entry-level theology stuff, all right? I would love to go way more into this. This is our entry-level theological language. All right, good job hanging in there, guys. That was almost 36 minutes or something. So, go ahead, open your Bibles to Exodus chapters 1 and 2. Exodus 1 and 2, we're going to read that and then work time.